Hey everyone, Avatar Guy here. Today I want to talk about a book that just recently came out called The Bigger Picture by John Landau. Now, John Landau is or was the producer for the Avatar movies. That's Avatar, Avatar The Way of Water, and the upcoming Avatar Fire and Ash. He'd been a collaborator with James Cameron for the past 30 years, and he wrote a biography just before he died in 2024. He put out this book, and I was very excited to read it and give it a review and tell you guys what I think. Overall, it's actually a very life-affirming book from a man who is writing when he's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. There's lows in the book, but I would say mostly highs. And it's definitely one that I think I enjoyed more than I ever anticipated I would. And I hope that he would appreciate me saying that. There's some very emotionally strong points, and it opens with a foreword from James Cameron. I read it originally from Apple Books, so it was in an e-reader format, and then I went and listened to bits of it from the audiobook after I saw that someone on the Avatar Discord server said that James Cameron reads the opening, and there's a segment from the end that John Landau himself reads, which is very emotional, but again, still very life-affirming. Right from the offset, the book is sort of split into sections about John's own life and his career and his family, which he loved every element of it. It starts with a foreword from James Cameron and sets this really poignant tone, who talks about the fact that they did the first test screenings for Avatar 3 earlier this year in 2025, and that he was very sad that John couldn't be there to experience it with him, and that they asked the audience a question basically saying, who would want to see that movie again? And everyone put their hands up. And he said, that's the kind of thing that John would have loved to see. The success of Avatar 3 would be the ultimate tribute to John, and I'm sure it will be. He really frames that entire, experience of reading the book, and that it's a celebration of this huge career and memorial to this amazing man who, ultimately did shape the modern blockbuster. I'm going to be referring back to my notes as we go, so I don't miss any of the points. I made quite extensive notes. What really came through in every single page is John Landau, the character, and who he is as a human. That if you've ever heard him in interviews talking about family, the message of Avatar, how much he loved the themes and the values, and that was what was important for him, this book confirms it was all really genuine. That's who he was. That you get a real sense that his public personas, that's who he is, which for a film producer doesn't seem like it's such an obvious thing. That love for his family is a constant theme. He constantly refers back to the love of his mum and dad, the love of Julie, his wife, and the love of his sons. It's clear that he also considered, the people he worked with as part of like an extended family, and that the humanity that you feel in the films that he's produced, like Titanic and Avatar, are a direct reflection of him. Landau says something that stuck with me, which is that he felt that his life could be divided into two parts. Before James Cameron, and with Jim. That their partnership was one of the most successful ever in film history, and that it goes over how they work together. Landau saw his job as creating basically a safe space for James Cameron to be able to do his work, and he did kind of all the logistics so that Jim could handle the vision. In that way, I think that in many respects, people understate John Landau's influence on the Avatar movies, that John Landau is in just as many ways the architect of Avatar as James Cameron is. And I don't think that's something that kind of the general audience often appreciates when they see these movies. It's probably something that is true of producers in general, but someone as hands-on as John, certainly so. It really gets interesting for fans, I think, when he talks about the lots of kind of insights into the process between him and Jim. That he talks about one of James Cameron's rules of storytelling, which I'm going to take a note of, is that the visual climax of a movie must come before the emotional climax. And if you think about it, Titanic, you have this massive, spectacular sinking of the ship, and then you have the kind of quiet, heartbreaking moment of Jack sinking into the icy ocean. In the first Avatar, you have the huge battle between the Hallelujah Mountains, between Jake and Quaritch, and then you have the moment where Jake's life is in peril and he's transferred into his Na'vi body. And then again in The Way of Water, you get the sinking of the sea dragon, the giant battle, and that's the emotional hook straight after of Netiam dying. It's one of those things that seems so obvious once it's pointed out. That this is, one of James Cameron's it's his formula. And John speaks to him as about being an engineer when it comes to the creation of his movies. So you do get this really deep insight into his relationship with James Cameron in many ways and through many stories. And you also get this story of that's going on alongside it of John Landau loving his family, how much he supports them, how much his family supported him, and how he worked his way up through the film industry. Now, that's not to say that he wasn't from a, I think, very privileged background. He admits that, but he doesn't really get like any, he doesn't catapult it into movie producing. He works his way up through the ranks, starting out, like he's literally got walkie-talkies and he's running around on movie sets, making sure that people have the walkie-talkies. That's literally what he's doing. It's also, I think, the book is a goldmine of that kind of fascinating stories that he tells. I won't go over all of them. I really do think that I'll say this right here, right now. If you love movie making, movies in general, any of the movies that John Landau has ever produced, Titanic, Avatar, anything, Alien 3, there's so many. True Lies. Go and read this book. It took me maybe 5 hours to get through it in 2 sessions. You can listen to the audiobook as well, which I think is about 7 hours, 8 hours. Yeah, I would highly recommend people read it for the insights that he gives. But just a few fascinating stories. So he talks about that when they tried to call Sam Worthington to offer him the part of Jake Sully, they couldn't reach him because he was up a mountain. And that he makes this joke about, literally they knew that they were Jake Sully just from that alone. It was proof that he was born for that part. Another interesting one for James Cameron fans is that the writer later Kalogridis helped Jim with the Avatar script, which I hadn't actually heard before, but I knew that she'd worked with him on scripts like Alita, but I didn't know that she'd worked with him on that. For the real movie fans, lots of details as well about movies that they developed but were never actually made. So there's a movie called The Dive, a remake of Fantastic Voyage, and one that I'd never heard of called Nagasaki Deadline, which is about basically a nuclear attack on the United States. And that's for that reason they sort of didn't go with it. Another great piece of trivia was that Stephen Lang, Colonel Quaritch, he also auditioned for Colonel Hicks in Aliens, didn't get the part. I never knew that. Ultimately, I think what the bigger picture shows is that for John Landau, the bigger picture wasn't just box office numbers, although he did say that box office numbers were more important than awards because box office numbers were were the general audience voting for you. It was about combining that spectacle with real human values. That it was about partnership with James Cameron, the cast, the crew, everyone that he got to meet and bring his kind of passion to their life. That his absolute dedication, unwavering dedication to his family and building the team based on loyalty. I think with his son Jamie also stepping into like his role, it leaves you with that impression that his legacy is continuing. It will carry on, both with his son, but also in the kind of hearts and minds of the people whose lives he touched. It ends with a message from John himself, where he thanks the people who would kind of be at his funeral. But even in that message, he's still again it seems very life affirming. He talks about how grateful he is, how much gratitude he has for the people that have helped him in his life. And I think that his legacy is going to be honoured with Avatar Fire and Ash. I think you should go and check out the full book if you can, when you can. And I think that there are many lessons that John Landau has definitely given me in that book that I will take away on like a deep philosophical level. I wouldn't say it's positivity, but it's always thinking of how to overcome a problem. And I personally sometimes have that tendency to not give up, but want to overcome a problem. And John Landau seemed to be someone who was always like, I can get this done. Let's get it done. A lot of people realize James Cameron's like that, but he's also like that. So yeah, my review is it's a sad book in the context of he was 63, I think, when he passed away. But man, did he live like a life, and it's really amazing that he changed movie making forever. Go check out the book. Thank you for watching.